Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. My name is Patty Troyer. I'm a fiscal monitor with the Office of Community Assistance. The purpose of this presentation is to review some highlights of the 2020 Uniform Guidance modifications, and also to let you know that the Office of Community Assistance is aware of these changes, even though they may not be effective yet for our programs. As I stated before, the changes to 2CFR Part 200 were effective on November 12th of 2020. These changes were applicable to any new awards and modifications which were issued on or after that date. The rules regarding Health and Human Services grants are contained in 45 CFR Part 75. And at this time, HHS has not incorporated the changes made in 2CFR Part 200. The key changes that we would like to review today are in the areas of indirect cost, procurement, contracts, and closeouts. This short list is far from all-encompassing. There were many changes to the code, including clarifications, revisions of definitions, and also some numbering and lettering changes. One of the major areas of change that was made to 2CFR 200.414, indirect cost. And at this time, I realize some of you may have already attended external webinars or conferences regarding the changes to 2CFR 200. And that being said, you would realize that the changes to the indirect cost rates are significant. We would like to remind you that HHS indirect cost is codified in 45 CFR Part 75.414. And again, HHS has not adopted these changes yet. Therefore, Office of Community Assistance will not adopt the 2CFR 200.414 changes regarding indirect cost until they are officially changed in the HHS code. The next area of change is in procurement. They have made some changes to the purchasing categories, which are now just in 3 categories, which is informal, formal, and non-competitive. Informal is a purchase that simply does not exceed the simplified acquisition threshold of $250,000. And this category was previously micro purchases and small purchases. The formal purchase section is anything exceeding the SAT, and also that would include, any sealed bids or requests for proposals. And number 3, non-competitive, is pretty self-explanatory. That's simply sole source purchasing. Something else they've added is that entities should show preference to American-made goods, materials, and supplies, and we ask that you consider that in making future purchases. Some important reminders for you. Once again, we'd like to say that Office of Community Assistance purchasing thresholds are more restrictive than the federal guidelines. You can find our restrictions in operations manuals for each of our programs and also in Section 41 of the grant agreements. We would also like to recommend that you use due diligence in creating your own purchasing limits. This should be based on internal controls and the amount of grant funding you received. But just to remind you, you need to stay within the Office of Community Assistance Procurement Guidelines for purchases with OCA grant funds. Another thing that they've changed in 2CFR 200.216 that we want to make you aware of is there's prohibition of expending grant funds to obtain telecommunications or surveillance products from entities associated with foreign governments. In the slide below, I have put the logos of these companies that are specifically forbidden. We would just like to remind you that when you are purchasing telecommunications or any surveillance equipment, cameras, security cameras, that type of thing for your agency, you should check with your vendor to make sure that the equipment didn't originate from one of these entities or any of their subsidiaries. And finally, just for your clarification, we want to mention that there were some changes to the closeout deadlines in 2CFR 200.344. So new guidelines have been extended to the closeout timeframes for direct recipients of the federal awards. However, the Office of Community Assistance follows the rules of the Illinois Grant Funds Recovery Act, which requires that all refunds are due within 45 days of the grant closeout. Therefore, we will still require that all closeouts be submitted within 45 days of the grant close date in order to avoid any confusion. And that's the end of my short presentation. We can answer any questions you have during the live webinar, which will be held on March 10th, or you can also email or phone our office with any questions or concerns you have regarding these changes. Thank you for your time.